Recording, Chip.
Okay. It doesn't show up on my end.
It's not showing on your end? All right. I can cut all this out. Just whenever you want to take it, go for it.
We're rolling?
We're rolling. So
I got no clock. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Welcome in, everybody.
Oh. Hang on. Give me a clear stop so I can cut all this out. So just take a 2-second pause and then do your thing.
Welcome in, everybody, to the Flagship Podcast. Hope everyone had a great Valentine's weekend. Guys, hope you survived. Hey, I'm Chip Brown of Horns247.com, joined as always by my esteemed colleague and proud Tampa Catholic graduate, the one and only Eric Henry. Eric, how you doing?
Chip, it's my first Valentine's Day as, a truly spoken for person. I have learned it is a day that, needs to be taken very seriously. Not that I didn't understand the significance of it prior, but it's different when, I don't want to throw Chip under the bus. I'll throw myself under the bus. When you're just kind of living life, it's not serious, right? It's take it or leave it, right? But when you're truly committed to someone, it takes on a different significance. So we made it through unscathed. Hopefully we'll see many more. I think we're doing all right, Chip. How about yourself?
Hey, I think you hit the nail on the head. Survive in advance when it comes to Valentine's Day. All right, Eric, lots of stuff going on here in the off season. Spring football will start on March 9th, but football season never ends around here. We'll get to some football, some men's and women's basketball, little baseball. Baseball season is underway, got off to a nice start. And softball had a good weekend as well. We'll touch on all of it. And of course, some take it or leave it on this February 17th edition of the Flagship Podcast. E. Henry, a couple of housekeeping notes since our last podcast. We do have new contracts. We're getting a look at what Will Muschamp is going to earn. He's going to earn almost $1 million more than Pete Kwiatkowski. Muschamp's, in fact, the Texas Regents will meet tomorrow and Thursday to finalize these contracts. But Will Muschamp going to get a 3-year guaranteed contract that will pay him $2.7 million in 2026, $2.8 million in 2027, and $2.9 million in 2028. Pete Kwiatkowski made $1.9 million last season, and he'll get paid the full $2 million that he was supposed to earn in 2026 because that was a fully guaranteed contract. Eric, your thoughts on Will Muschamp's dinero?
Dinero, that's a good one, Chip. Well, this brings me back to Steve Sarkisian saying that he wants someone to be the head coach of the defense, right? Chip, you've been around the 40 acres a long time. Being the head coach of the defense for Texas football is a huge responsibility. And if that's what Steve Sarkisian desires, then Will Muschamp is being compensated accordingly. That was the first thing that came to mind when I saw the number. I'm trying not to read too much into the fact that it is $1 million raise over Pete Kwiatkowski. I do think, Chip, there's a conversation to be had as to whether or not, if we're looking at recent body of work, that who's the better defensive coordinator, right? Not talking about at their peaks. Right. I don't think anyone's going to argue that Will Muschamp has had, higher highs, right? Greater peaks as a coordinator than Pete Kwiatkowski has. But if we're in a business of what have you done for me lately, it does seem a little bit hard to justify such a greater level of compensation. However, it's not about what you deserve. It's what you can command, right? And in the case of Will Muschamp, if you were going to get him, Chip, you noted it when the hire was made. If you're going to get Will Muschamp to walk away from watching his son play football, which was his stated desire, I would assume he was going to be compensated accordingly. For Will Muschamp to get back in the game, I would assume he would be compensated accordingly. And as I led with, for him to be the head coach of the Texas Longhorns defense, which is a big responsibility, he would be compensated accordingly. Those are my thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah. We also learned that Kyle Flood will be getting a new 2-year deal that will pay him $1.45 million. Or sorry, he's getting a 5% salary increase from $1.45 million to $1.525 million in 2026 and 2027. Eric, Kyle Flood did not have a great year by any stretch of the imagination. He had a crap year as the position coach for the offensive line. It took 9 games for him to figure out the best combination of starters on that offensive line, and the team played better. Arch Manning played better behind a solid offensive line. Shocker. But not only is Kyle Flood being retained, but he's getting a 5% salary increase from $1.45 million to $1.525 million. Eric, I guess when you've been with Steve Sarkisian for 9 years, you get a mulligan. You know, you can have a bad year, I guess, and still get a 5% salary increase.
Chip, there's probably a more recent reference than the one I'm going to make, but I think you'll appreciate this as a longtime football fan. So just bear with me, okay? As the audience knows, I'm a Floridian. And, before the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were a thing, the Miami Dolphins, before the Jacksonville Jaguars were a thing, the Miami Dolphins were Florida's team, right? So I have an uncle who's a longtime Miami Dolphins fan. Chip, do you remember the name Tom Olivedati, the Miami Dolphins' old defensive coordinator? What was the issue with those Dolphins teams under Don Shula with Dan Marino? They had plenty of offense, right? But they didn't really stop anybody. Tom Olivedati was a defensive coordinator. I just had to look it up because I remember my uncle just cussing. How does this man have a job year after year after year? He was a defensive coordinator for 9 years with Don Shula and Dan Marino. And all that time, the Dolphins offense took off and the defense was what it was, right? Sometimes that's just your homeboy. Simple as that, right? That's that. There's probably more a recent reference, but it's just the one I could hear my uncle as a kid growing up in Florida. I could hear him making that reference year after year after year. I say that in jest, but I think it's real, right? Whether you're a Jeff Banks or a Kyle Flood, there are going to be people on this staff who Steve Sarkisian just trusts, right? And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think there has to be. If Steve Sarkisian were just totally rigid to change, right? Saying, hey, there is no one on my staff I'm willing to get rid of, aside from coaches who take other jobs, right? I'm just going to be loyal to my guys. I think that's one thing. He's shown a willingness to make changes. I do think there's a measure of, hey, you have to have your core guys who maybe have either been here since day one or just guys that you trust. And that's with Kyle Flood. In addition to, I guess this is the part. I think Kyle Flood, the body of work, is one that isn't necessarily saying, all right, you have to get rid of this coach. I think the thing that may really bug Longhorn fans is the 5% raise. You think that's fair?
I mean, I probably would have locked him in at what he was making.
Sure.
That's just me. I remember there was one year, and not to call out Bobby Kennedy, the former receivers coach at Texas, but I remember when the salaries came out and Bobby Kennedy didn't get a raise. He was like the only assistant coach who didn't get a raise, and it's not unheard of. So, I mean, you can still afford to put cheese on your Whopper making $1.45 million a year. So, Johnny Nansen, the co-defensive coordinator, Eric, is going to make he got a 10% salary increase from $1.1 million in 2025 to $1.2 million for 2026 and 2027. So Kyle Flood did not get the raise that Johnny Nansen got. So maybe that's Steve Sarkisian's way of saying, you're only getting a 5% raise, Kyle. You're going to have to go earn that other 5% if you're and actually he's locked in for 2 years. So, maybe that's what Steve Sarkisian is looking at there, that he'll maybe earn his way back, but it'll still only be a 5% salary increase. So we also know the numbers for Blake Gideon and Jabbar Jalouk, the new running backs coach, came over from Florida. He was set to earn $675,000 in 2026 at Florida. But as we know, there was a coaching change. That staff was basically let go. So he's got some offset language. He signed a 2-year contract with Texas. He's only getting paid $325,000 in 2026, but Florida is paying offset. So he'll end up making, I don't know exactly what the offset language is, but I would imagine he's going to be making at least $675,000 based on what Florida is paying him. And then he'll make $850,000 in 2027, Eric. And Blake Gideon, who earned $1 million last season at Georgia Tech as defensive coordinator, has signed a 2-year contract at Texas that will pay him $800,000 in 2026 and $850,000 in 2027. So Blake Gideon taking a little bit of a pay cut to come back to Texas and work with Will Muschamp. Your thoughts?
A little bit of a pay cut, but spoiler alert here: state of Texas, no state income taxes. First living in Atlanta. Is that a pay cut, Chip?
Yeah,
that might be a pay raise. That might be a pay raise if you do the math there. No, but outside of that, I as you mentioned, right? Jabbar Jalouk certainly going to get some compensation from the University of Florida for his services there. Blake Gideon, I don't think it's much of a surprise, quote unquote, that he's not making $1 million just based on the roles. But with that being said, the compensation is all what you would expect for positions on the Texas Longhorns football staff.
Yeah. And former Longhorns safety Ben Wells has been named the recruiting coordinator at Texas. I covered Ben Wells when he was at Texas. He played from 2007 to 2009. He was a 4-star prospect from Beaumont Ozen, who redshirted at Texas in 2007 before playing in 24 games in 08 and 09. And Wells played in the Canadian Football League with the Montreal Alouettes and spent the last 2 seasons as the director of player personnel at Texas State under G.J. Kinney, and now comes in as recruiting coordinator for the Longhorns. So kudos, congrats to Ben Wells. I'm sure this is a huge opportunity for him to establish himself as a go-to connector for the Longhorns. And well, Ethan Burke got snubbed. Imagine that, Eric. Ethan Burke did not receive an NFL Combine invite. Jack Endries did. Anthony Hill Jr. did. Malik Muhammad did. Michael Taft got one. DJ Campbell got a Combine invite. Trey Moore, the guy who came in and replaced Ethan Burke as a starter, got a Combine invite. And Jalen Gilbo got a Combine invite. But Ethan Burke, who's got 26.5 tackles for loss, 10.5 sacks, a pick 6, 2 forced fumbles, 1 fumble recovery, 3 blocked field goals in his career at Texas, snubbed for an NFL Combine invite. He did tell me, obviously, I would have liked to be invited, but it's not something that bothers me. I've been through tougher things in life, and this just gives me more motivation, Eric.
Yeah, I'll kind of approach this from 2 points of view. One, not getting an NFL Combine, not getting an NFL Combine invite You need another cup of coffee. That's not the end of the world, right? I mean, you have pro day. There are so many opportunities to work out in front of NFL scouts. And quite frankly, Chip, in 2026, right? Or not just 2026, we've seen with the past decade and change, you've seen certain prospects choose to do certain things at the combine that are going to showcase their strengths and say, all right, I'll save the 40 or my bench press, whatever, till pro day, right? So there's going to be, it's not the end of the world. I also say that because, we're not talking about a small school prospect, right? When I was covering group of fives, it was one thing if you didn't go to the combine, right? At Texas, you're going to have all the scouts there. There's going to be no shortage of attention at the practice bubble by the Frank Dini's Fields come, pro day. So there's that. The other thing in terms of him actually getting snubbed that surprises me is Ethan Burke seems like the type of prospect you would want at the combine, right? A kid who didn't play, football full time until, halfway through his collegiate career, his high school career, a long, I don't want to call him gangly, but in a sense, kind of gangly, with the measurements, the long arms that Chips noted, an 83-inch wingspan, a prospect that's seemingly growing, right? Not that, and certain, some of these kids are finished products, but him especially, right? That seems like the type of player specifically you would want at the combine to get a closer look to say, okay, we know this is someone who had the lacrosse background. As Chip is noted, his Texas career was always productive, but sometimes found himself out of the starting lineup because, they wanted to go with Trey Moore or go with different players. That seems like exactly the type of prospect you'd want to say, hey, I want to get him here in Indy for 4 or 5 days, right? And just put him through the ringer and see everything we can get. So in that sense, I'm a little bit surprised that he didn't get a combine invite because his play over 3 years as a full-time player or, as a rotational player, sometimes full-time player, seemed to warrant that. But again, it's not the end of the world because there's going to be plenty of attention come Texas Pro Day.
Yeah. Yeah. Burke made big plays in big games. I mean, he had the blocked field goal against Arizona State in the college football playoff. He had the 4th and goal stop of Amari Daniels at Texas A&M in a 17-7 game. He had the game-ending strip sack at Mississippi State to seal that one. He had the strip sack of Will Howard against K-State back in 23 that Jonathan Brooks ran in for a touchdown on the next play in a game that ended up being a 33-30 win for Texas in overtime. So Burke made big plays in big games, and you feel like his best football is still ahead of him. Because he did come from lacrosse. Hell, he was committed to Maryland for lacrosse out of Westlake High School. And then once the college football programs started recruiting him, the Maryland lacrosse coach said, look, if you can get a full scholarship in football, that's better than what I can do in lacrosse. So, Ethan Burke, his dad, a former pro lacrosse player who is the head coach of lacrosse at Austin Westlake, was like, okay, what do you want to do? And Ethan Burke said, I want to play football. And so here we go. It's a cool story. We'll see how it ends, but it will not include a trip to the NFL Combine. Eric, a couple other nuggets. You've got winter workouts going on and some, just some tidbits from sources. Cam Coleman, the wide receiver from, transfer from Auburn. Sources saying it's weird to see a wide receiver bigger than Ryan Wingo, especially on a Steve Sarkisian offense who tends to go with those 6-foot burners. But Cam Coleman, every bit of 6'3", from what we're hearing, he's come in, he's gotten to work. He's not cutting corners. He's not entitled. He puts in the work. He wants to win. Bonding with Arch Manning, as you'd expect. And even though Arch is limited following his foot surgery, he's, still throwing passes to the guys. And Coleman will be wearing number 8 this season. Quarterback KJ Lacey kind enough to switch from number 8 to number 9 so Coleman could wear number 8, E. Henry.
Chip, it feels weird to make the statement I'm going to make in college football, but I think you know where I'm going. You think there was a little bit of that financial compensation to KJ Lacey, like you usually see in the NFL, you know, when you get a new player comes in, a free agent comes in and gets that number, a draft pick. You think so?
I think it's highly possible.
It's possible. It's possible. We won't report anything and say it's possible, right? Not that KJ certainly couldn't have given up the number 8 out of the goodness of his heart, but I think we all know that Cam Coleman ain't hurting for bread. Making his way to Austin, so maybe, you know, broke off KJ Lacey, you know, maybe a gift, maybe a nice little gift, you know, something, you know. But no, that aside, Chip, it's of course always encouraging to hear that your new addition, the addition like Cam Coleman, is hitting the ground running, no pun intended, you know, bonding with Arch Manning. And I think, Chip, this is kind of the direction I was going to take it in. I'll bounce this thought off you. He has an opportunity to kind of be, again, that Adonai Mitchell, that Matthew Golden, that guy who comes in and can, you know, instantaneously in 1 year, from the time, first off, his talent is a reason he can do that, but beyond the talent, just as a force of nature, as a personality, really spearhead the group, spearhead that room, spearhead the offense. That's kind of the way I see it. And this is without knowing Cam Coleman's personality, right? I certainly didn't cover him at Auburn, but I think there's room for him to be that guy in that room, I think is the point I'm making, Chip.
Yeah. Yeah. That you want your best players to be your hardest workers. And it sounds like Cam Coleman is coming in with a lot of intention to win. He wants to win, and he wants to obviously elevate his draft stock as high as possible, but he wants to win. And that's key. Because Adonai Mitchell had already won a couple national championships at Georgia before he came to Texas and tried. If maybe Quinn Ewers throws a back shoulder ball instead of a jump ball at the end of that Sugar Bowl, who knows? But that's a whole nother show. All right, Eric, let's see if there's a couple other nuggets. On linebacker Rasheem Biles. I like this. In talking to sources, the guy has great energy, a lot of juice. He's funny, gets along with everyone. And then when the workout gets underway, Biles is trying to win at everything. So, you know, we're hearing his personality is different from Ant Hill. Ant was funny and engaging too, but he was also super intense. Biles is kind of light all the time because he's confident, knows what he's doing. He lets his athleticism show off his intensity. The guy can fly. I'm super excited about Rasheem Biles. He just seems like a guy who has a great nose for the football, has incredible athleticism, and you know, don't let him get the ball in his hands because he thinks he's an offensive-minded player, Eric.
What intrigues me about this is I think you're getting kind of a similar dynamic that you would have liked, and you got to an extent last year with Colin Simmons and Anthony Hill. The reason I say to an extent is obviously Colin Simmons during the first 5 games of the year took him a while to really hit his stride. And then by the time seemingly, Chip, Colin Simmons was hitting his stride, Anthony Hill was dealing with injuries. And then, of course, you know, it became time for him to focus on the NFL draft. Where I'm going with this is I think if you get the best version of Colin Simmons and you're able to get the best version of Rasheem Biles from day one, you get 2 players who live in opposing teams' backfields, right? We know what Rasheem Biles did in terms of tackles for loss over his 2 seasons at Pitt. You couple that with Colin Simmons' ability to rush the quarterback and now his improved ability to play the run. That to me is super intriguing. I think that's kind of the biggest takeaway. You know, when I talk about I think about the potential of Rasheem Biles, I think it's having 2 dynamic, you know, all conference type, maybe all American types who can live in opposing teams' backfields.
Yeah, Rasheem Biles, in his time at Pitt, just to further what E. Henry was saying, 10 sacks the last 2 seasons, 31 and a half tackles for loss the last 2 seasons. So to stress E. Henry's point of Rasheem Biles living in opposing backfields. And Ian Gaffrard, the massive 6'5", and I'm told that's probably cutting him short. That he seems like he's bigger than 6'5", maybe 6'6", and 389 pounds. He's the Arkansas nose tackle transfer, and they are working to cut some weight, and I'm hearing it might be closer to 380 now, Eric. But the thing that I think has impressed, some sources is that his weight is evenly distributed. This is not a guy with a big old Santa Claus gut. This is a guy who's, who played basketball in high school and who's got good feet, and he's just huge. I'm fascinated by Ian Gaffrard.
It's funny you talk about a guy not having that big old basketball gut, right? We're not talking about, your Tony Saragusas, your Ted Washingtons, those guys were excellent defensive tackles, right? They did their job, but, we're not talking about that, right? We're talking about even, affection. I'll give a more recent reference, like a Vince Wilfork, right? Even though Vince Wilfork was put together certainly more so than the two guys I referenced, I think, Chip, and this may be an extreme example. It's one of the things that got, former Florida defensive tackle Desmond Watson was the struggle with him, right? A guy from my neck of the woods, Tampa, Florida. He was 500 pounds in high school, right? For him to get down to 440 was an achievement. But with Gaffrard at 6'6", 380, certainly has the frame for that weight. But if it can be evenly distributed, he doesn't have to come out and win, Mr. Olympia or any bodybuilding contest. But if it's not that sloppy bad weight that you got to redistribute, right? That to me, Chip, I think especially if you're not spending your entire offseason trying to get the body composition like you would an incoming freshman from high school, right? If he's already put together in that way, that mold that you want, then you can focus on all the other things. And that to me is encouraging to hear.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, what position battle, Eric, kind of most intrigues you going into spring football, which will begin on March 9th. Of course, the spring game on April 18th. But what position battle intrigues you the most?
I'm going to give you two. I'm going to give you one that may be a little, I don't want to say controversial, but interesting. How about the one at left guard, right? Lawrence Seymour, we need to figure out if he's going to be able to play college football. There's no reason to believe that he wouldn't. We don't think Texas would take this chance. However, he's got to get that squared away. And last I remember, he's finishing up class at Western Kentucky. He's got to finish up his degree, right? There's going to be room for Dylan Sikorsky to make his push. So I guess Dylan Sikorsky versus the field right now. How about that, right? A little curveball at you. So that is one. And then I also think, you take a look at some positions you think might be locks, but I'm just curious, maybe less of a position battle to see how it shapes up or how it kind of formats itself in spring. The secondary, specifically star, right? Grayson Littleton, is he a lock at star? Is there a possibility to move him around, right? We know what Will Muschamp likes to do with the nickel star role. Is there a Kobe Black, Bo Mascow, Cade Phillips, all these guys who are going to be competing for playing time. So I think one specific position battle for me is left guard, and the other is just taking a look at how the secondary, specifically the cornerbacks, will shape up.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm very interested in tight end because, it's weird. Your top returning tight end by receiving yards is Amari Winston, who had 2 catches for 47 yards. The guy everyone is super hyped about is Nick Townsend. Great athlete, had 2 catches for 7 yards, but had a 2-yard jet sweep for a touchdown against Texas A&M. And obviously was highly recruited, a lot of excitement around him. And then you have 3-year Spencer Shannon. He's been on campus 3 years, Eric Henry, and he has not been targeted for a pass yet. He's played over 200 snaps, still not targeted for a pass. And then you bring in Mike Masunis from Michigan State. I think this guy who had to wait his turn, has had some injuries, 6'5", 259. People look at his numbers. Oh, he only caught 19 passes for 232 yards, 2 touchdowns. Well, he was only targeted 21 times. So the guy's, catching the balls that are getting thrown to him. I think he's underrated. I think people are sleeping on him. I think he is absolutely the guy to beat for the position. But how much progress can Nick Townsend make? Can Spencer Shannon make? Can Amari Winston make to make that a real battle? I think that's going to be intriguing. And don't forget, you've got these talented receivers. You got Cam Coleman, Ryan Wingo, Emmett Mosley, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th. And then you've got, some guys who are fighting to get in the mix. Khalil Lockett, Day-Day McCutcheon, Jermaine Bishop. So is that going to mean more 11 personnel? 1 back, 1 tight end, as opposed to Steve Sarkisian's. He likes to use the 12 personnel to put a tight end in motion for eye candy, help the quarterback determine if the defense is in man or zone. So just some food for thought there. All right, Eric, are you ready to talk a little basketball?
Let's do it, sir.
Okay. All right. Well, since the men are on a 4-game winning streak, as you wrote about, coming off this win at Missouri, first time they've had a 4-game winning streak in conference play since Shaka Smart was roaming the sidelines for the Longhorns in the Irwin Center. Eric, your thoughts on these Texas Longhorns who will play LSU tonight at Moody, another seemingly winnable game for Texas. Your thoughts?
Chip, before I give my thoughts, and I'm apologizing, I'm putting you on the spot here. Can you even remotely remember the last time Texas had a 5-game win streak in conference play? And I'll give you a clue. It's in the same time range as the 4-game win streak in terms of years. Same coach, in fact.
Okay, so that season.
It wasn't that year. It was the year prior. So I believe Texas would have missed the tournament that year. They started out something like 14-10, something like that, but won 5 straight games in 2020 before falling in the season finale. If that remotely rings a bell, I probably have to give you some players off of that team. I'll do that, come back in a second. But nevertheless, my thoughts on the 4-game win streak. The Missouri game was one for me that I needed to see, right? Because this is no disrespect to, listen, it hasn't been done. 3 straight games hadn't been done here in almost 2.5 years, right? So you don't want to take any win for granted. But beating up on Oklahoma, who, as I texted Chip, the state of the Lloyd Noble Center, that's seemingly the state of that program, although that fire may have lit a fire under Porter Moser's team because, hey, Texas fans, let me pause here. You need to be OU fans because the more OU wins, the more that the higher probability that OU, the win at Lloyd Noble Center that Texas had on January 31st, will be a quad 1 win, right? So even though I'm joking by saying the program's a dumpster fire right now, they did beat Georgia. So that is key. But they beat a poor OU team. They beat, I'm forgetting, Chip, Lamont Paris, South Carolina, who is struggling, right? So they did beat up on some teams who are struggling, but to get the win at Missouri, Dennis Gates' team was 17-7. Is this the strongest Missouri team in the world? No, but Mark Mitchell is the type of player that would have given Texas fits earlier in the year, right? Especially with the way he can draw fouls down low. There was a specific play, Chip. Don't know if you caught it, but there was a specific play in the second half where they got the ball down to Mark Mitchell, their leading scorer, 17 points a game. And he took Modest Vokatitis down in the post. And all Modest did was realize, while Mark Mitchell's a great player, he's 6'8". I am 7 foot. And he put his hands, just as Sean Miller asked in the post game, straight up, didn't come down, and Mark Mitchell had nowhere to go. And Mark Mitchell had to turn and pivot, and he tried to kick it out. And guess who was there for the steal? Dalen Swain. And that steal went fast break bucket. That's literally what Sean Miller's been asking for all season, right? Those are the types of things that will encourage you about this team. So I'm expecting them to beat LSU. They are an 11.5-point favorite. I love the way Nick Cody, we should probably take 30 seconds and bounce this back and forth, right? After being buried in Sean Miller's doghouse, opened the season as a starter. He finally gets his opportunity with Lucina Traore still nursing the sore knee, the same knee that he tore the ACL last year. So that'll be something to keep an eye on. Nick Cody, 15 minutes, 9 points, tied his season high, 6 boards, right? Can you believe this team is finding depth later in the year?
That's what we've been saying, right? He's got to coach the whole roster so that those guys waiting their turn come back better. So we're seeing some of that.
That always felt like a thing, at least the last 2 seasons with the Rodney Terry era, that especially last year with Trey Johnson, right? It was like, who else are you going to find? Now you're seeing guys emerge later in the year. That's, Chip, and I'll pass it back to you on this. Those are the types of things that give me confidence in this team truly hitting its stride and playing its best basketball heading into mid and late February.
Yeah. Yeah. And it seems like, this team's more connected. I know Cam Heide did not have a good game at all against Missouri. He was 0 for. But they do seem more connected. They know their roles now. Just a quick reference to Cam Heide. Sean Miller said, we need you to be more aggressive in every aspect of your game. And it lifted him up. And now we're seeing Nick Cody, who is a good athlete, needs to, got good length, needs to be a contributor. And now, we'll see if they can get Sim Wilcher going, because Sim Wilcher's made some plays at key times. He's also made some, boneheaded turnovers at key times. But if he can keep coming, now you're starting to add that depth. You've got Kendall Weaver, who's kind of your energy guy, who just scraps and claws for whatever scraps are on the table. And they do seem more connected. And we've seen probably 2 of the best games from Matas Vokatitis in the last 2 games, where, as you pointed out, he's not biting on every up fake. He's not, he's 7 feet tall. He doesn't need to bite on up fakes and foul. And some of the other players are not biting on up fakes either. So they're not fouling as much, which is, we know, Sean Miller earlier in the season said, we have a virus. We will foul the ever living bleep out of you. So, signs of progress, Eric, and sign of a well-coached team is week-to-week improvement. So here we go. And Texas gets fouled as much or more than any team in the SEC, and they're hitting their free throws, which got to do that. I pointed out going into that Missouri game, if it comes down to a free throw shooting contest, take Dalen Swain over Mark Mitchell, because Mark Mitchell, not a great free throw shooter. And so, you got LSU tonight. And then, is it Florida yet?
It should be LSU and then what, A&M, if my memory serves me correct here. LSU, no, Georgia on the road. Georgia, Florida, then A&M.
Georgia, Florida, then A&M. Okay, so this is where it gets interesting. If they handle business against LSU, can they go back out on the road and take down Georgia, a team, as you pointed out, that Oklahoma just beat. So maybe Georgia is limping at just the right time. All right, good stuff there. And as Eric, you wrote about on Monday, the Texas, NCAA tournament projection has them, according to CBS Sports, as a 9 seed. Now, I would argue, okay, you better keep winning and get to that 7 seed, or lose and get down to a 10 seed, because you don't want to be on that 8-9 line and be facing Michigan or, whoever else is in that 1 seed, right?
It's funny you mentioned that because it's actually my thought when I've been poring over the brackets and kind of, whether it's CBS Sports or some of the other publications, just seeing the route for Texas based on, whatever region they have them in. Couldn't agree with you more, right? It's one of those weird kind of idiosyncrasies about the tournament, but that makes the most sense. I shouldn't say makes the most sense, but if you're just talking about a path to where you want to go, right? It may be the path of least resistance for Texas there. Now, let's go with the optimistic point of view here, right? As far as Texas being a 7 seed, I mean, if they take care of business against LSU and OU, and as Chip said, Georgia appears to be faltering right now. So let's give them those 3 games. If they can steal one versus Florida, Arkansas, or A&M, and right now A&M, Bucky McMillan's team, they've been up and down after starting really hot, right? If they can get 4 out of the last 6 and win 1 or 2 in the conference tournament, there's a real possibility they could be a 7 seed. And quite frankly, if they win 4 out of the last 6, Chip, it's going to be crazy what I'm about to say because it never felt like this was even a possibility just a month and a half ago. They could be a double bye in the SEC tournament, right? Which would be something you weren't even thinking about just 6 weeks ago. So I guess the thing that I take away from this is everything is in front of Texas basketball. Everything that they want is directly in front of them.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, you want to be playing your best basketball in March? Let's see if Texas can pull that off. The Texas women, what a stretch of that was a rough week last week in terms of ranked opponents in a 7-day span. And on Thursday, Texas went to Vanderbilt and got waxed. I mean, waxed 86-70. Michaela Blake's is the truth. She was fantastic. She had another 30-point game against Texas. And Vic Schaefer sat 4 of his starters in the fourth quarter, the entire fourth quarter. Rory Harmon, Jordan Lee, Brea Cunningham, or Kyla Oldacre. It was not Justice Carlton got benched. And he, in the postgame, said this team has no heart and it's the softest team I've ever coached. And they had, Friday, Saturday to practice and then face number 22 Tennessee in Knoxville, where they packed the gym, 14,000. And Texas played really well, really tough in that game, but Tennessee can shoot the 3. Texas, not so much. So Texas is up 10 with 5 minutes left, and Tennessee cuts it to 1 with 3 threes. And then Texas's defense took over. And everyone focuses in on Breonna Preston's steal at the end from Talasia Cooper. And it was a great play. It won the game. But Brea Cunningham poked the ball loose from Nia Cunningham. And Jordan Lee got credit for the steal. But that sequence ended up with Madison Booker getting fouled with 16 seconds left and hitting both free throws to give Texas a 3-point lead. And then Tennessee went for a 2 instead of a 3. And then Jordan Lee got fouled. She hit 1 of 2 foul shots, and that's how it ended up 65-63. But Texas, their defense showing up big. Rory Harmon with some big defensive plays too down the stretch. And Justice Carlton, fantastic in the fourth quarter. So Vic Schaefer at the podium said, hey, this team's got heart. This team's got toughness. Y'all saw that today. They just didn't have any last Thursday against Vanderbilt.
Chip, I'll say this. I don't want to downplay the Vandy loss because Vandy, I don't want to say they exposed. That's too strong of a word. But what stood out to me most about the Vandy game is Texas could not get that game in the manner that they wanted, meaning the pace. They were running up and down with Vandy. And if you know Texas on both ends of the court, Yes, they play great defense, but they are not equipped. If they are missing shots, it's the way that sometimes this team can miss shots. They are not equipped to go run up and down with a team with a Michaela Blake. So again, if you haven't seen her, you did not watch this game. She is, Chip, what I like to call the product of the Steph Curry era. These young athletes. I don't want to call her kid, young athletes who grew up in the era where you just shoot from the logo, and she can knock him down from NBA range, right? And the same thing with Aubrey Galvan. So I'm calling it a bit of an outlier in that they were making everything, and Texas could not slow the pace down. So there's that. On the flip side of that, I don't want to devalue the win against Tennessee, because Kim Caldwell's team, they were playing desperate. Like, they'd come out and we've gotten beat by something like 30-something points, almost 40 points a few nights back. You don't have to be a women's basketball scholar to know that's not acceptable with Tennessee, right? When you're playing on Pat Summitt Court, that's not going to cut it, right? And first off, that's a team, without going on a deep dive of Tennessee women's basketball, they fired Kelly Harper, who was very popular in Knoxville because she was a former Lady Vol, right? She takes the job at Missouri, if my memory serves me correct, and had faced Kim Caldwell the night prior. So that was a very motivated team, right? They needed to come out and play their best basketball. So don't devalue the win over Tennessee, and don't make too much of the loss to Vandy, because I think that was just a matter of styles make fights.
Yeah, and Vanderbilt went out after that huge win and lost to Georgia, which keeps Texas in the mix for the regular season championship, although South Carolina still only has one loss. Texas has 3. Vanderbilt has 2, and Tennessee has 3. So heck of a race for the regular season championship among the SEC women. All right. Texas baseball has started its season, and wow, what a performance. Now, it was UC Davis. UC Davis is not going to be confused for LSU. Certainly not. But this was part of the plan for Jim Schlossnagle. He didn't, opt for the big preseason, early season tournaments where he's going up against established programs. He's trying to get all these newcomers situated, and that's exactly what happened, because first let's start with the pitching, since we knew coming in that Texas was going to be strong with the pitching. Ruger Riojas, 1-0 Friday night starter, goes 5 innings, gives up 1 run on 3 hits with 9 strikeouts. Eric Henry, not a bad way to start things off. He's got a 1.80 ERA.
No, listen,
Ruger Riojas.
Listen, that was, Chip, I don't want to make too much of it and say it was an important start, but, Ruger was open and honest about the way he closed the year, right? It being kind of a low point for him. For Jim Schlossnagle to put that trust back in him to be that Friday night starter, right? And to have the type of performance he had, again, wasn't make or break, but definitely encouraging. And to spin it forward a little bit, not that, can be done with UC Davis, but it looks like Jason Flores is going to get the start tonight against Lamar. Jason Flores is that guy who I know we kind of speculated, I projected that he would be in the rotation instead of Ruger, right? So for Ruger to come out and establish himself, I think is key. I think Jason Flores, if he can kind of be that midweek guy, then you're talking about forearms, right? As opposed to, Ruger playing that role in the bullpen. So don't want to understate the importance of that game for him. And just in terms of the confidence, getting back out there and being that guy, because let's not forget, Chip, Ruger was not a full-time starter. Ruger wasn't a starter at all, at UTSA. I think he only had 1 start, made a ton of appearances. I think he only had 1 start over his 2 years at UTSA. So for him to kind of settle in, and remember, wasn't really a starter to begin last year, right? So for him to kind of regain that confidence and settle into that role, I think is big. Yeah.
Yeah. He said that, remember the team got the flu right before the Arkansas series, and he gave up 9 runs in that Arkansas, but then it got worse for Ruger. He ended up getting bronchitis, and he lost 20 pounds. So his end of season was not good at all, as you mentioned. And now he's put that weight back on. He feels good, and 9 strikeouts in his debut. Not bad. Luke Harrison, not as sharp, but gets the job done. Luke Harrison, the lefty senior, Saturday starter, gave up 5 hits, gave up 2 runs on 5 hits, with 6 strikeouts, couple walks, gave up a couple doubles. And Texas kind of had to fend off UC Davis in that Saturday win. It was 6-4. And then, and we'll get to Anthony Pack Jr. in a minute because he was fantastic, the freshman right fielder, and what it means for Jonah Williams. And then on Sunday, Dylan, the praying mantis Volantis, takes the mound. Unbelievable. 7 shutout innings. He was looking at a no-hitter through the first 5 and ends up giving up 1 run on 1 hit with 1 walk, 8 strikeouts for Dylan Volantis. Had a couple of throwing miscues over to first base that Jim Schlossnagel's like, yeah, I'm not worried about that. So Texas rolls 9-1 in game 3, sweeps the series from UC Davis. But Eric, Anthony Pack Jr. is your leading hitter right now. The freshman. He is he's batting .545 after going 6 of 11 at the plate. And even when he made outs, Eric, he was hitting the ball hard. And the left fielder for UC Davis made a great catch that probably would have been a triple for Anthony Pack in the Saturday game. So Anthony Pack Jr. in right field, where Jonah Williams is also competing. But how are you going to get Anthony Pack out of there? Because Jim Schlossnagel said, you want to play in the outfield? Get me some hits.
No, Chip. I mean, listen, there's a conversation. Maybe there's an opportunity for some DH if it doesn't necessarily work out in the outfield. But Jonah Williams, we all know, highly touted prospect, football, baseball, certainly came out the gate in baseball last year, made an impact. But folks, let's be real. I'm going to ask Chip this really quick. We are up on time here, getting close to time, so I'll state that for the record. We talk a little bit more about Anthony Pack and take it or leave it. But Chip, hot take: if Anthony Pack Jr. played football, it was a 5-star recruit, would he have just the amount of, what I'm saying, pomp and circumstance as Jonah Williams? Because he can't control that. But Anthony Pack was a top 250 MLB prospect coming out of high school. He is not just some guy.
No.
Chip,
Dylan Volantis said, this is the guy who is giving me problems at the plate. For Dylan Volantis to say that, the guy who throws, that sinker from the moon, that's pretty impressive.
So that's just for Longhorn fans. I know the excitement. There's so much, Jonah Williams' potential is tantalizing, right? You just want it everywhere. Football, basketball, wherever. Football, basketball. Maybe you can do that too. Football, baseball, wherever. But Anthony Pack, if he had the same type of, pomp and circumstance as, Jonah on the football field, you'd be talking about him the same way in terms of intrigue, right? So just sit with that.
Yeah. And Texas softball went 5-0 over the weekend. Tegan Cavan had a mildly rough outing, but Cambria Salmon came in with relief. I mean, I say Tegan Cavan struggled. They still won the game in a run rule fashion, but home runs all over the place. Reese Atwood is now your all-time home run leader at Texas. She's was already your all-time RBI leader. Reese Atwood is simply amazing. But you're seeing the freshmen, JC Nichols, Elisa Sneed, Mattia Lawson, they are not afraid. And Elisa Sneed, Mike White's got to find a way to keep her in the batting order because she is raking. And Leanne Good, Reese Atwood at the top, but Elisa Sneed right there as a freshman. So Texas softball getting it going. All right. Eric, you ready for some take it or leave it?
I'm ready, Chip.
All right, then don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with Take It or Leave It. All right, welcome back, everybody. It is time for everybody's favorite segment of the show, Take It or Leave It. Eric, take it or leave it number 1. Jonah Williams is going to have a hard time beating out Anthony Pack Jr. to play right field. Take it or leave it.
I'm going to take this, Chip. I'm going to take this. Anthony Pack, as I said, he's no slouch. He's not just a guy. This is someone who had a legitimate opportunity to play professional baseball coming out of high school. Will Jonah Williams eventually see time in right field? We'll see. But he's not just going to walk in and get his job back. This is not Max Ballou walking back into the lineup last year, Chip. Your thoughts?
Yeah.
Or seems I'm taking it.
Yeah. No, I'm going to take this as well, because after watching Anthony Pack at the plate, he's a left-handed hitter. He's got great speed. His fielding, he had a ball that he was camped under, looked like it was going to be routine, and he missed it. And look, right field, Jim Schlossnagle has said, with the way the wind blows, it tends to, send everything over to the right. The ball swirls. It's a tough place to play. If Anthony Pack's fielding becomes an issue, then Jonah could get back in there. And as you said, Anthony Pack could move into a designated hitter role. So I'll take it for now, though, because Anthony Pack is raking. All right. Take it or leave it number 2.
Take it or leave it number 2. Texas men's basketball will finish the last regular season games, last 6 games, 3-3. Take it or leave it, Chip.
You know what? I'm going to leave this. I'm going to say Texas goes 4-2. I am buying the Sean Miller improvement. Call me crazy, but I think the Texas men's basketball team can finish these last 6 4-2, Eric. So I'm leaving it. What say you?
Chip, I'm on board. I'm going to leave it as well. I'm going to give you the games. LSU, Oklahoma, Georgia, A&M. I think those are the 4. We'll see how they look against UF. Listen, UF's playing a really good basketball right now. Luckily, they get that game here at Moody Center, here in Austin at Moody Center, as opposed to the Stephen O'Connell Center there in Gainesville, because the O-Dome's a tough place to play. If Chip knows, he found out firsthand. The Swamp, tough place to play football. The O-Dome, very tough to play basketball.
Right across the street from each other.
Right across the street. But no, I think those are the 4 games they will get. And I think that'll give them a very real shot at possibly being a 4 seed in the SEC, depending on how the other teams shake out.
Okay. All right. So we agree there. Take it or leave it. Number 3, Eric, the Texas women are the 3rd best team in the SEC, behind South Carolina and Vanderbilt. Take it or leave it.
Okay. I'm going to go overall and kind of let the audience in a little bit, right? I do an SEC, or I vote in an SEC poll. And the way I tend to vote in the poll is weekly, right? Where has said team finished weekly? If we have a head-to-head matchup, I will give the tide to the team that won that game. But I'm going to take this question as overall. I still think Texas is the 2nd best team behind South Carolina, despite the fact that Vandy beat them. So I'm leaving it, Chip. What says you?
Yeah, I'm going to leave this as well. Look, Vanderbilt got the advantage of having that game at home, and home court matters in the SEC, especially in women's basketball. Vanderbilt's packing their gym. That it is a gym too. It's called Memorial Gymnasium. No one calls their building a gymnasium. That's because Vanderbilt's gymnasium looks like it's an auditorium for like orchestra concerts. But hey, March is about neutral courts, and I think Texas is 1 or 2 in the SEC on neutral courts, which may or may not show up for Texas in the SEC tournament, which we know is played in South Carolina. So, I too am leaving this. All right. Thanks everybody for tuning into this week's episode of the Flagship Podcast. Please like and subscribe to the Horns247 YouTube channel. Please become an annual member to Horns247.com. You not only get all of our great content, all the insider nuggets and great coverage, but you also get a subscription to Paramount Plus. Yeah, so you can watch all the UFC and Landman and all the great shows. All right. Until next time, for Eric Henry, I am Chip Brown. Stay safe and keep the faith.